Welcome to Two Finger Tuesday, a production of the James Mcgee Show. Conversations are just easier had over a good old two finger. So pour yourself a glass of your favorite booze and join your host, James Mcgee, for a drink and some real talk.
All right, welcome back to the James Mcgee Show, Two Finger Tuesday. I am your host. I am James Mcgee, and Tom Wells is back. He stood us up last week.
I know.
But you know, like Joe and I said, we know that there's only two reasons you stand us up: your family and a train. And
That's true.
And your family was fine, so it was a train this time.
It was a train. Yes,
we understand, and we definitely missed you. So, man, let's talk about what we're drinking, because what we're talking about tonight, we need a drink.
Yeah, we do.
So I am drinking Jefferson's Ocean. It is absolutely one of my favorite bourbons. It is a hell of a bourbon.
Excellent.
I was sitting in my bar earlier, my wife and I, and she was in the bar, and she said, "Hey, you know you have an unopened bottle of Jefferson's Ocean?" I said, "Well, it won't be unopened long. Give me that bottle. We're going to have that tonight." So I must have got it for a gift, and I try to keep the good bottles hidden for when I have company and stuff, and guess it was hidden good enough. It's probably been sitting there a year. So
wow.
That's what we're drinking tonight. What you drinking?
I am drinking E.H. Taylor. I'm trying to get myself coordinated here. E.H. Taylor is a Buffalo Trace brand from Frankfort, Kentucky. Colonel E.H. Taylor, very good, very smooth. It's one of their, I can't remember how many year whiskeys it is, or bourbons rather, but it's one of their best.
Buffalo Trace does. I mean, they do it right, man.
They do.
I'm also eating some blackberries.
Oh yeah.
You know, we're you know, this is my evening snack time, Tom, where I have my fruit and my raw honey.
Very nice.
I have an apple too, but I have my wife and I were doing some landscaping on one of our bushes earlier, and she said, "We got some blackberries." I said, "Well, pick them some of the bitches. Let me taste them." So I went and rinsed them off, and so I'm eating some fresh blackberries from my garden. So that's pretty
awesome.
cool.
That is cool.
So what we're talking tonight about is 48 law enforcement officers in this nation so far this year. We have not even gotten through April, 4 months. 48 officers killed in the line of duty. I'm going to break those down and talk about the manner of death and some states that had the highest and all that. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give a toast to these officers, the departments, and their families. My thoughts and prayers, Tom's thoughts and prayers, this show, everybody involved, thoughts and prayers are to each one of you. That's a high number, and we've got to really look at that. So here's to all of you. Godspeed.
Godspeed.
All right, let me get my notes. We're going to break it down a little bit. So 2 of them were 9/11 related illnesses. There's still some of those going down a little bit every year. I haven't had any from COVID yet this year, but
it's good.
One was sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I was going to say is, did you know that 9/11 related health-related deaths have eclipsed the number of police officers killed that day by, I think, double now? There were 73 officers killed that day in the line of duty, and that number is over 150 in health-related deaths.
Well, let me tell you, they deserve it, and they absolutely. You know, my dad died almost 3 years ago.
Yeah,
and he was in Vietnam, and they attributed his death, his lung cancer, to Agent Orange, and the VA took care of him, and I think that they should be. You know, that is a line of duty death.
Yep.
And I think that's it's admirable that they're recognizing that.
Yes.
Okay, so one from an aircraft, a crash from a helicopter. One by assault. I don't know what that is because it's not. I don't know. It's just general.
Yeah, I don't know.
Automobile crash. 13 automobile crashes. You know, that's one of the highest we always have.
Yep.
One drowned. One duty-related illness that might be COVID. One electrocuted. 1 by fire. How horrible.
Oof.
15 by gunfire. 1 inadvertent gunfire. So I'm assuming that must be maybe friendly fire.
That was that. Well, no, that was a training accident. That was actually here in Ohio.
Are you okay? I got you. Okay. 4 of a heart attack on duty, and that's not every heart attack is going to be as a line of duty death, but in certain cases, whether if they're doing physical training, if they're doing a physical test, if they were in a pursuit of something that was high exertion, and then they end up dying of a heart attack, it can be a line of duty death. We had one. We put in for it. He didn't qualify, but you can. There are some heart attacks that can be line of duty.
Yeah.
1 person by stabbing, 5 struck by a vehicle. That one of them was just this week in Harris County, Texas, which is 2 hours west of me.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 vehicular assault. I'm assuming that's going to be like Kaya's.
Probably.
It wasn't by accident. They hit them on purpose.
Right. Purposeful strike. Yes.
Yep. So the months total in January 7, February 15 was high. March 9, we are 24 days, 23 days. What's today? The 23rd, 24th?
23rd.
17 in the month of April.
Almost
terrible month.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go by state. Let's see, 4 in Georgia, 3 Illinois. My state didn't have any. 5 in New York. Tennessee had 4.
Wow.
Texas had 3. Tom, y'all had 1.
Yeah, that was the training one.
And then several states had. Mississippi had 2. Minnesota had 2. Missouri had 2. 47 male, 1 female. Average age 39. Average tour of duty 12 years. That's now that's to me that's high.
Yeah.
I think that's usually they must have had a couple high numbers that brought the average up because normally it's less than that. I think normally the average service is about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah. Well, it's right after I call those the complacency years. Right when you finally got solid and you're a veteran, you got 5 to 7 years under your belt, and then you start. I hate to say,
but a lot of
in that
tenure, a lot of people are out of that, or kind of out of the frag pattern. They've moved up and they're in less risk positions.
Right.
So I think that. So we have to also mention the total canine deaths is this year is 6, 3 by gunfire, 1 stabbed, 1 struck by a vehicle, and 1 training accident. So again, our thoughts and prayers are with the families of these officers and the departments. So Tom, what I want us to talk about, and you talked about it in length, of Kaya's death, and look, our listeners, if you haven't listened to Tom on the full podcast, the High Level Human podcast, episode 3, you need to listen. He really breaks this down. We have invited Kaya's father to come on. I think he's going to come on soon, and that says so much about him to come on. I want our listeners to know the effect that a line of duty death, you had 3 of them going on right now. I think the one we talked about last week, I think they buried him maybe yesterday. And there's one going on in Harris County, and then there's another one, I think, in Georgia right now.
Did you see the one in Chicago? It was either this morning or yesterday. Police officer coming off duty in uniform is robbed.
I did hear that, yes.
And he was killed, and they took his gun and his car. He's in uniform coming off of work. I mean, what does that say for our society?
Yeah. The Tom, break down a little bit about, and we could go on forever on this, just initially, just what's going on, especially as a leader, what these leaders are dealing with, planning of funerals. You've got other officers that may have been in this incident. There's so many things that are going on. Give me some of the leadership challenges. Our listeners need to know what cops are dealing with during this time.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest parts for me, I mean, again, I was so lucky because I had such a great team that I was surrounded with. But as the chief of police, especially having been I'd been chief for a month, and granted, I'd been assistant chief for 9 years prior to that. So I felt like I was, at an administrative level, I was pretty solid. But the complete feeling of being overwhelmed by all the different stimuli, it's the trying to care for the emotions of the family, or try to anticipate their needs and anticipate the needs of your employees, which are totally varied. Some employees are very affected, some of them not so much, and then your own feeling of responsibility that even though, like in my situation, I there was nothing I could have done to prevent what happened. Kai was well trained. It was just a horrible, terrible thing that occurred where this guy purposely hit her. And I knew there was nothing that I could have done to change that. I wasn't per se responsible for what happened, to her. But as the chief of police, you feel like an officer was killed on my watch. That's a hard thing to swallow. And then you have the community. We have extreme support in our community. And just to see the devastation of the people and how sad they were about that happening. And then, of course, you have our employees and their families, the fear that's in their spouses, that their husband or wife may not come home, that this actually touched so close to home that, it was somebody that they knew that was killed. I mean, I could just, like you said, I could go on for an hour on that. But all those things are such an incredible emotional toll, not just on me, on everybody there.
Yeah. It is. It's hard. And I'll tell you that I don't think I've ever told you this when this was in 2008, and I'm not going to get too detailed because I could go on forever, and we may cover this one night. But so it was the year before I went to the NA, and we had we had a deputy. It was during a hurricane, and he ended up dying of carbon monoxide poisoning because I made the decision to allow them to go home. And he goes home, and the generator wasn't properly ventilated, and he ends up dying. And man, let me tell you, he was like a son to me. We were very close, and that was hard. And we were dealing with the hurricane. Then we dealt with the line of duty death. Let me tell you, that carried. I never went to his grave for 11 years, and I carried that guilt around. I'm just going to tell the story now. So I carried that guilt around with me for 11 years. And then I had a friend recommend. So I was talking to a friend, and I definitely needed some counseling. There's no doubt I needed some counseling on that. And I was talking to a friend, and my friend said, why don't you write him a letter? I said, what the fuck am I writing him a letter for? He's dead. I said, trust me. And he never told me why he knew that. Something must have happened. Maybe he had a loved one die.
That's huge.
So I wrote a letter and went to his grave, read the letter. And let me tell you, I drove past at least twice a day for 11 years. The cemetery was a mile from my house. I had to pass it every day to work. I never went.
No, that's that post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. And then I started going. I started going once a week. Now, since I've moved from there, I don't go as often. I go on his birthday. I go on holidays. But when I went and read that letter and apologized and told him, you died because I made a mistake. You died because I failed you. And that was hard. And it was hard reading it. But when I tell you, once I did it, it was pretty liberating. It was pretty I had to forgive myself. And I know he forgave me.
Yes.
But I had to forgive myself.
And let me tell you, I know you, of course, we're good friends, and I know who you are as a person. I know that the reason you carry that guilt is because you care. You had nothing to do with why he died. That was a total fluke accident that was caused by a mechanical thing that you had nothing to do with. But because of who you are as a human being, that's why you carried that guilt.
Well, I think that, when we don't now, I don't think I should have carried it as I should have addressed it. And there's a lot of things I should have done, but the opposite. And I think you'll agree, because you did beat yourself up, and I'm glad that you no longer are. You did beat yourself up over Kai's death.
I did.
But
I internalized it.
When you don't, I'm not saying we should be beating ourselves up, but when we just automatically, and a lot of people just, well, nothing I can do about it, and they just discount it.
Yep.
And we just, you and I can't, because we care about people, and I think that's just part of being the type of leader that care about people. That's and even if him and I weren't close, I would have felt that way. But that was a big loss, and I can tell you there's some leaders right now dealing with that. And if any of them are listening, man, take care of yourself. Don't do like Tom and I, and fuck around and be in denial and carry that inside.
Let it eat you up.
It's hard. It's hard. So what do you think is going on with 48?
Yeah,
that's really high, because normally we've gotten close to I think last year was 113. 4 months in, we're damn near halfway there.
Apologize for that. Forgive me for that. Almost had a technical difficulty there. My laptop was about to die, and I didn't realize it wasn't plugged in. That I was that low on battery. So sorry about that.
Well, that's our age of showing our technical our technical abilities.
Please forgive me for that. I do think that these things sometimes do come in a little bit of a wave. I don't know that there's even necessarily a correlation why those numbers jump every once in a while. I mean, we'll go sometimes a week and there won't be any, and then you think, how long can this last? It's almost as if you're like holding your breath at that point. And especially because they're spread across the country, there's really no way to predict when they'll happen. But boy, it sure seems, I mean, think about that statistic you gave before, 15 gunfire deaths out of 48, you said there were 48 so far?
Yeah.
That's literally a little over 33%. A third of the officers have been murdered by guns.
And
then there was a stabbing in it. So it's over a third, because you had that stabbing and the intentional strikes. Mm-hmm. So those are felonious killings, is over a third of the officers being killed. That's, I don't know. It's
one thing is consistent is automobile crashes and by gunfire, stabbing, or intentional deaths is always neck and neck, and they're always the two highest.
Right.
So those are the two that now crashes, that's something that I know you fought as administrator. We ended up coming up right before I left. We came up with the system and a new policy and some software that was not popular. And when I tell you, I took it on the fucking chin over that. Yep. But I will tell you this. I didn't see the results because it was towards the end of my towards my retirement. But I've checked a couple times, and wrecks are dramatically down, and that is that's really good to know, because it's that's something that we can prevent, because most of the time the crash is at the fault of us.
Yeah.
Well, and very few times the crash is at the fault of somebody else. It's usually at the fault of us. A lot of times it's, it's in a pursuit, or it's responding code 3. But we're controlling the gunfire. Yeah, we can train, we can do those things. But like you say, bad guys are trying to kill us, and we can't control that.
No.
But the crash part, we absolutely can control that. And
yes.
if we really have to look at that all the time, constantly looking at that. And that's not popular.
It's not.
Because us as cops think we should just be able to drive fucking fast. And that's what we think. And a lot of people, like Steve said when he was here last week, hey, part of the reason I became a cop because I want to carry a gun and drive fast.
Yep. We want to pursue people till the wheels fall off. But let me tell you a real fast story about how we did that at our place. This is when I was assistant chief, and the chief and I were looking over this pursuit. We'd become involved in a pursuit of a retail shoplifter that in the end, after about a 40-minute pursuit, it turned out he had 2 small children in the car. And of course, we were looking at the in-car video, and there were several occasions where our officer went through red lights at between 60 and 70 miles an hour trying to catch this person. The person went the wrong way on the highway. The officer followed them the wrong way on the highway. It caused a minor accident. But what we did was, instead of looking at that and going, oh my gosh, we got to beat this officer over the head and discipline him, what we did was we realized, you know what? There are holes in our pursuit policy, and we're not we were not being as careful and as self-reflective on how we reviewed them as we should have been. And so what we did was I sat down with that officer and I showed him the video and I went through the whole pursuit with him and explained what our expectations were. But I told him, I said, this is a learning experience. This showed us that we were the ones that were lacking, not you. His attitude was he wants to catch the bad guy. And he does. He's a great cop. Eric Brayton's his name. I love him to death. He's an excellent police officer. But in his mind, he felt like he was doing the right thing because he was trying to catch the bad guy. So what we did was we sat down and we went over this. And instead of disciplining him, what we did was we changed our policy and made it tighter in terms of the loose ends. Not tighter as far as being restrictive, but there were some restrictions we added, but we made sure that we educated our officers and used that as a training tool instead of a disciplinary tool. And it was much better received than if we hit him over the head and said, you were wrong, bad guy. You know what I mean? And that really changed the way our pursuit culture was in the department. And by the time I became chief, and I made some changes, and I made it to where we couldn't chase anybody that was, if it was a nonviolent offense as defined by Ohio law, then you couldn't chase the person. And that was unpopular because people felt like, well, if I've got a traffic offender and I try to pull them over and they flee, I have to let them go. Well, we all know that the balance of needing to catch a traffic offender based on what they usually run for is not worth the risk. But to me, a violent offense, which included certain misdemeanors like domestic violence and menacing, you could chase the person under certain, again, you had to watch each pursuit for its circumstances. But that really made it, I think, a lot more where the officers were like, you know what, I can live within that environment. It's giving me the ability to do my job, but it isn't handcuffing me to the point where I feel like this is ridiculous. I can't do anything.
Well, that's exactly what we did. I put a panel of different ranks together, changed the policy, and let me tell you, when I say I took it on the chin, I had deputies, mamas calling me, tell me that I'm putting their kid at risk because I'm not letting them drive. But you said the right word, and good for you for not using that for discipline, because I don't even want to get into, because I'll go on and on about there's just I have a different philosophy and a different view of, we had some administrators that wanted to just hammer people when they got in regs and suspend them for several days. Well, that was not reducing the amount of regs. Right. Changing the culture is the only fucking way to do that. And it's not popular, but you go and change the culture and you make them see, hey, we're fucking killing ourselves. And this is how we presented it was, hey, we got enough dangers of things we cannot control. We cannot control bad guys wanting to kill us. But right. What we can control is us killing ourselves. So let's do this. Let's at least do that. And if you think about it like this too, Tom, we train in defensive tactics, shooting tactics more than anything. And most people never use their firearm.
Right.
We drive every fucking day.
That's right. We train more on our firearms than we do on our cars.
Yeah, and that's where the culture has to the culture has to change, and part of the culture change is spending more time driving, teaching driving, teaching the
right,
policy.
Yeah, teaching, right.
Yes.
Teaching high speed driving. You're right.
Yeah.
You know what amazes me? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good. No, go.
What I was going to say is what really amazes me, and this is not any kind of indictment against any of the car companies that produce our police cars, but I really thought that when, as much as you know me, I love the Crown Victoria. There isn't a better police car than and the old Chevy Caprices. I love
old school. That's old school right there.
That's my kind of police car. But when the police cars started changing, when we started changing over to the Chargers and the Explorers and the Tauruses and that sort of thing, the modern police car I thought was going to really help reduce the number of officers killed because of all the safety appliances in there, such as the side airbags and all those kind of things. And I'm really surprised to see how many officers are still killed in crashes. Now, granted, that comes from overdriving your car a lot of times, or where you're just, unfortunate to be in a collision with somebody that either doesn't yield to you or whatever. But I just am a little bit surprised that those injuries and fatalities aren't less with the technology because I think the car companies have done a hell of a good job in building us better equipment than what we used to have.
Well, yeah, and we wear our seatbelt now too.
That's true. Below 100.
Back in the day, now in the early 90s, seatbelts weren't as popular.
No, you had to get out of the car quickly.
I went through. Yeah, I didn't wear. I was taught by the old school guy who said, "Don't wear your seatbelt so you jump out of the car quick." So and I just didn't wear my seatbelt. I didn't start wearing my seatbelt till 1995 when I had, or probably 96, 97, because my kids will not get in the car without putting on their seatbelt. So I had to lead by example, and that's why I started wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah.
But people are wearing seatbelts now. These young men and women on the road are used to wearing their seatbelts, as we weren't. Right. So I'm like you. Why aren't the deaths going down?
I think a lot of it is because of speed. Speed is still a big factor, and people just aren't either trained well enough or understand the dynamics of high-speed driving to control, to be able to keep their car under control and not have a catastrophe. Most of the deaths are occurring because officers are either getting struck or striking vehicles that are either side impacts or hitting trees or sliding sideways into trees because of overcorrection. I've seen that in a lot of crashes, and that's, you can have all the safety appliances you can have, but if you get hit, especially sideways, and you get a dissected aorta, you can't do anything about that.
You're right. Well, we're getting close to 30 minutes. You got anything you want to bring up? Anything you want to plug tonight?
Well, not as a little bit of a shout out. We went up this morning to the Seneca County, Ohio Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff Frederick Stevens invited us up there. We had a 15 members of his department went through a railway investigation and safety course that myself and our state coordinator put on. And so I want to give a shout out to him for helping his troops have a better understanding of there are a lot of railroad operations in that ation. And so we were more than happy to come up there. So I want to thank him for his hospitality today and give him a shout out.
Well, that's awesome. I want to give a shout out to anybody and everybody that is doing something to train their officers, keep them safe, and just make us better. And that's what we need. We need leaders like that are thinking outside the box. That I'm glad to see that. So next week this Thursday, like I said last night, this Thursday I'm going to completely break down the George Floyd incident. And like I said last night, I don't like to speak unless I have facts. Now that I have facts, I said it last night, and I'm going to say it again tomorrow night, Wine Wednesday. I'm going to say it again. There's 4 men sitting in prison that are innocent.
Yeah.
And it's fucking wrong. And Thursday, I'm going to break all the facts down.
I can't wait to see it.
And then next Tuesday, get you a stiff drink.
We're going to have a surprise guest maybe, huh?
Is that what you're talking? I hope so.
Yes. Or maybe I had the dates wrong. Were you thinking of something following week?
Oh, no. I want you talking about. No, I want that for the full podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
But hopefully Steve. Hopefully we can get Steve, because I know Steve will have a lot to say.
Oh, yeah.
If Steve could come next week, and I'm gonna tell you, I'll plug that again. One of the most powerful podcasts that we've had was this past Thursday with Steve Lewis, who is a good friend of mine, a good friend of Tom's. And you want to talk about the way I describe Steve, he's just a dude, man. The guy's just a good fucking dude. He helps everybody that he can. Yeah. I also, what I call him is, if you watch the Lethal Weapon series, Steve Lewis is Leo Getz. That guy
I never thought of that.
That guy can make anything happen. And he's a get things done. He's a go-to guy. He is a fixer, and he's just a great guy. And hopefully we can get him here next week, because I know he'll have a lot to say about that. But
yes,
I'm gonna break that down Thursday, put the facts out there, and then next Tuesday, hopefully we can get Joe. Man, if we can get Joe off a beach. Last week he was in South Padre Island.
Okay.
Now the man's in Miami Beach, all for work. We need Joe's job.
Yeah.
The problem is, I can't do what Joe does, but I sure like to have his job. But good for him. Hopefully he'll be back next week. But until then, let me get my drink. Good seeing you, my brother.
Good seeing you too. Drink up.
Until then, yep. Mcgee and Wells are